Look, if you had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here telling you this story, I would have told you that you were completely losing your mind. But you need to listen to me carefully, because every single word of this is true, and it still doesn't feel real to me either. Let's start with Hanseong University. It's basically a playground for the top 1% of Seoul. If your parents don't own a conglomerate or a major political party, you're invisible. Or worse, you're a target. And right at the top of the food chain was Kang Min-jae. Everyone at school was absolutely terrified of him. I'm not talking about regular high school bullying where a guy knocks your books out of your hands. It was much deeper than that. The professors wouldn't even look him in the eye during roll call. They'd just skip his name or nod nervously if he actually showed up to class. If he walked down the main hallway, the entire crowd would part down the middle. Students would literally stop talking mid-sentence and look down at the floor until the sound of his footsteps faded away. The rumors about his family were endless. People in the dorms whispered that he could get any student expelled with a single phone call to the dean, and nobody would dare question it. Others said his family owned so much of Seoul that his grandfather basically decided who got into politics and who got ruined before lunch. He had this completely detached, unbothered look on his face all the time. He didn't smile, he didn't argue, and he didn't hang out with the other rich kids. He was just an island of ice. Honestly, I thought everyone was just being incredibly dramatic. My name is Chai. I was a scholarship student, which meant I didn't have the luxury of worrying about campus myths. My entire daily routine revolved around keeping my head down, maintaining my grades, and running from my morning lectures to whatever random part-time job I had lined up for the afternoon just to help my parents buy groceries. But I did have one secret. I ran the university's anonymous whistleblower blog. It started because I was sick and tired of watching wealthy students buy their way out of cheating scandals while scholarship kids got penalized for being 5 minutes late to an exam. I loved exposing them. I loved showing the campus that their money couldn't buy silence from everyone. So to me, Kang Min-jae wasn't a god. He was just another rich guy living in a bubble who would eventually inherit a company he didn't work for. I assumed our paths would never cross. I was just a ghost on campus, and he was the son everyone was afraid to look at. Until the Tuesday morning that completely flipped my life upside down. It was a completely normal Tuesday morning, or at least it started that way. I was sitting in the middle row of a packed economics lecture, trying to finish a cheap coffee and typing out notes on my laptop. The room was loud, filled with the usual gossip about weekend parties and designer clothes. Then, the back door of the lecture hall slid open. The change in the room was instant. The chatter didn't just slow down, it completely died. It was the kind of silence where you can hear the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. I looked up from my screen and Kang Min-jae was standing at the top of the stairs. He was wearing a simple dark jacket, his hair slightly damp from the morning mist, and his expression was completely blank. He didn't look at the professor, who had stopped writing on the whiteboard mid-sentence. He didn't look at the wealthy heirs in the back rows who suddenly sat up straighter, trying to get his attention. Min-jae's eyes scanned the room, moving past row after row of students who were actively looking away, praying he wouldn't notice them. Then his gaze stopped. Right on me. My breath caught in my throat. I told myself he was just looking at the empty seat near me, but he started walking down the steps, and his eyes never left mine. He moved with this effortless, terrifying authority that made everyone in my row panic. The two girls sitting to my left scrambled to grab their bags, practically throwing themselves out of the row just to get out of his path. Min-jae didn't even acknowledge them. He walked right up to my desk, pulled out the chair next to mine, and sat down. I froze. I completely froze. I forced my eyes back to my laptop screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, but my hands were shaking so much I couldn't type a single letter. My heart was slamming against my ribs so loudly I thought he could hear it. For the next hour, he didn't take a single note. He didn't look at the whiteboard once. I could feel his gaze boring into the side of my face, steady and unblinking. The air between us felt heavy, like a physical weight. Every student in that room was pretending to watch the professor, but I could see their eyes darting over to us in the reflection of my screen. They were watching me, waiting for the disaster to happen. The second the professor dismissed the class, I didn't even wait to pack my bag properly. I shoved my laptop in blindly, zipped it up, and bolted out the door into the crowded hallway, pushing past people just to breathe. I walked as fast as I could toward the arts building, convincing myself it was a random coincidence. Maybe he just liked the middle row. Maybe he was just having a weird day. But 20 minutes later, as I turned the corner into the main courtyard to clear my head, I stopped dead in my tracks. There he was. He was leaning against a stone pillar near the fountain, his hands in his pockets. As soon as I stepped onto the pavement, his head turned, and he locked eyes with me again. He didn't approach me. He just watched me. By the afternoon, it got worse. I went to the library, tucked myself into the furthest, most isolated corner of the third floor where nobody ever goes, hoping for some peace. I sat down at a small wooden table, pulled out my books, and took a deep breath. Not even 5 minutes passed before the chair directly across from mine pulled back. It was him. Min-jae sat down, placed a single textbook on the table, and opened it. He didn't say a word to me. He didn't introduce himself. He just turned the pages silently, his presence completely suffocating the small space. Every time I looked up, he was looking right back at me with those cold, unreadable eyes. By Wednesday morning, the campus gossip machine was at a total breaking point. Everywhere I walked, people were whispering behind their hands. I heard my name mentioned in the cafeteria, in the library line, even in the restrooms. Students were frantically trying to figure out why a scholarship girl from economics class was suddenly being trailed by Kang Min-jae, with most people assuming I must have done something insane to offend him and that my life was completely over. They thought I was his next victim. They thought he was playing a twisted psychological game to get me kicked out of school or worse. And honestly, looking at how relentless he was, I started to believe them. I felt like a deer being tracked by a predator, and I had absolutely no idea what I had done to end up on his radar. The psychological warfare at school was exhausting, but things took a turn into a complete nightmare a few nights later. My parents' small tech parts business had been struggling for months, and our family debts were piling up so fast that my mother was crying every single evening at the kitchen table. To help them out, I signed up with an upscale staffing agency that paid high hourly rates for catering shifts at luxury events. That Friday, I found myself working at the Hanseong Group's annual High Society Gala. It was held in the grand ballroom of a 5-star hotel downtown. The luxury was sickening. The ceilings were covered in massive crystal chandeliers, and the guests were dripping in diamonds and custom designer gowns. I spent the first 2 hours of my shift walking around in a stiff, uncomfortable server uniform, balancing a silver tray of expensive champagne and trying my best to remain completely invisible. I was standing near the grand staircase when the main doors opened, and a sudden murmur went through the wealthy crowd. I turned my head and my heart dropped. It was Min-jae. He was walking into the ballroom alongside his parents. In a tailored tuxedo, he looked even more untouchable and elite than he did on campus. He looked like royalty, completely detached from the people bowing to him left and right. But as I watched him from the shadows, I noticed something I hadn't seen at school. An older man with a silver cane stepped forward, Chairman Kang, Min-jae's grandfather. The chairman didn't smile at his family. Instead, right there in the middle of the crowded room, he began speaking to Min-jae's father in a low, biting voice, his expression full of absolute contempt. Min-jae's father just bowed his head, looking completely humiliated. Min-jae stood directly behind them, his face a perfectly still mask, but I could see his jaw clenching so hard the muscles jumped under his skin. Before I could process how intense that family dynamic looked, a sharp voice cut through my thoughts from right behind me. I turned around, and my stomach twisted. It was Chai-won. She was the daughter of a massive pharmaceutical tycoon, and everyone on campus knew she was arranged to marry Min-jae to solidify their family's corporate power. She was wearing a gown that probably cost more than my tuition, and she was glaring at me with pure, undiluted malice. She had seen Min-jae sitting next to me in class, and she had been looking for a reason to strike.
Oh, look. The pathetic Hanseong University charity case cleans up well.
Chai-won sneered,
her voice intentionally loud enough to attract the attention of the nearby guests. Tell me, do you think serving drinks to Min-jae makes you special? A stray dog belongs on the street, not at a gala. Stay away from him, or I'll make sure your little scholarship vanishes.
I kept my voice as polite as possible, though my hands were trembling against the silver tray, and told her I was just trying to do my job before asking her to excuse me. I tried to step past her, but Chaiwon didn't move. Instead, she took a deliberate step forward, her high heel catching the edge of my uniform skirt, and she forcefully shoved the bottom of my silver tray upward. The sound was deafening. The crystal champagne flute slid off the tray, crashing violently against the marble floor, shattering into thousands of pieces. Sticky alcohol splashed all over my shoes and the hem of Chaiwon's pristine dress. The music in the ballroom didn't stop, but every single conversation near the staircase died instantly. Dozens of wealthy guests turned around, staring at the mess.
Look at you.
Chaiwon laughed out loud, her voice dripping with cruel amusement as she looked down at the broken glass.
You can't even hold a tray properly. You are a pathetic charity case, Eun-chae. A stray dog belongs on the street, begging for scraps, not serving drinks to people like Min-jae. Did you really think because he sits next to you in a lecture that you're special? You're trash, and if I catch your pathetic face anywhere near him again, I will personally make sure your little scholarship vanishes by tomorrow morning.
The guests around her started snickering, whispering to each other, looking at me with disgusted, mocking expressions. I stood there, frozen in the middle of the broken glass, my face burning with a deep, agonizing humiliation. Tears were stinging the corners of my eyes, and I wanted nothing more than to run out of the building and never come back. But then, the whispers stopped. The crowd behind Chaiwon parted, and Min-jae stepped into the light. He didn't look at Chaiwon. He didn't look at the broken glass. He looked directly at me, and for a split second, the ice in his face completely vanished, replaced by a terrifying, dark fury. He didn't yell, and he didn't make a scene. He just stood there, his eyes fixed on Chaiwon with a glare so lethal that her arrogant smile instantly withered. She froze, her breath catching as she realized how angry he was. Min-jae turned his back on the entire room and walked away, but the sheer intensity of his silence left the ballroom completely cold. By Saturday afternoon, the humiliation from the gala had turned into pure, burning rage. I sat in the furthest corner of the empty university library, the rain pouring heavily against the high glass windows, matching the storm inside my own head. My hands flew across my keyboard as I finalized a massive, detailed exposé about Chaiwon's family foundation for my whistleblower blog. They wanted to talk about trash? They wanted to threaten my future? Fine. I was going to show the entire city exactly how corrupt her family really was. Suddenly, a heavy shadow fell across my desk. I didn't even have to look up to know who it was. The air always changed when he was near. I kept typing, ignoring him completely, and told him to go away because I didn't have time for his silent treatments. Min-jae didn't answer. Instead, he reached down, placed his hand firmly over mine, and forcefully pulled my laptop toward him. He reached into his pocket, slapped a black flash drive into the side port, and his fingers began flying across my keyboard, entering a string of command prompts. I lunged forward to stop him, yelling at him to get his hands off my laptop and threatening to scream for the security staff if he didn't drop it. Min-jae didn't even flinch. Before I could grab the screen, his hand shot out, catching both of my wrists in a tight, unyielding grip. His fingers were warm, but his hold was ironclad. I couldn't move an inch. I looked down at the screen and my jaw dropped. He was copying my entire database onto his drive. And worse, he was running a script that was completely wiping the source files from my hard drive. I furiously accused him of being a bully just like Chaiwon, using his dirty family power to bury the truth and protect her. Min-jae stopped typing. He slammed my laptop shut with a loud crack, but he didn't let go of my wrists. He leaned in close, and when I looked into his face, I froze. He didn't look arrogant. He looked completely strained, his eyes wide and dark with an emotion I couldn't understand, and his voice was actually shaking when he spoke.
Stop investigating this, Eun-chae.
He whispered, his grip tightening just enough to make me listen.
Delete the entire blog. Shut it down today. If you publish a single word of that article, Chaiwon's family will crush you before the sun comes up tomorrow. They will pull your scholarship, they will blacklist your parents from every bank in the city, and they will ensure you have nowhere left to run. I am telling you this for the last time. Do not publish it. Don't make me warn you again.
He released my wrist so abruptly I stumbled back against my chair. He grabbed his flash drive, turned on his heel, and walked out of the library into the pouring rain without looking back once. I sat there in the silence, my wrists still tingling from his grip, trembling with pure, unadulterated hatred. I thought he was just another corrupt heir using his strength to shield his circle. I had absolutely no idea that Chaiwan had already hired private data security investigators to track the blog's IP address. Min-jae hadn't deleted my files to protect Chaiwan's family name. He had done it to destroy the evidence before their investigators could trace the blog back to my laptop and ruin me permanently. He was taking the heat, and I was sitting there cursing his name. But Chaiwan's investigators found what they wanted anyway, and Monday morning became the worst day of my entire life. I had just stepped onto campus when my phone began buzzing relentlessly with notifications. I unlocked the screen, and my heart stopped. A fabricated, completely distorted article had been leaked across the official university forum. It had my full name, my scholarship details, and a series of fake, edited screenshots painting me as a malicious fraud who used an anonymous blog to blackmail wealthy students for hush money. It said I was targeting heirs like Kang Min-jae to extort millions. The campus reaction was instantaneous. Within minutes, my entire life turned into a public execution. I tried to walk across the main courtyard toward the administration building to defend myself, but before I could make it halfway, a massive, angry crowd of students began to gather around me. They started pointing, laughing, and calling me a blackmailer, asking how a rat like me even managed to get into this school. Within minutes, I was completely surrounded by a tight wall of dozens of students blocking my path. They were jeering, holding up their smartphones right in front of my face, and filming my reaction to post online. One guy yelled out, demanding to know how much money I wanted from Kang Min-jae, before throwing a crumpled piece of paper right at my face. It hit my cheek and bounced off. The crowd began to chant for my expulsion, closing the circle tighter and tighter around me. Someone aggressively shoved my shoulder from behind, causing me to lose my balance entirely. My bag slipped off my arm, hitting the pavement, and all my books and papers scattered everywhere across the dirty concrete. I dropped to my hands and knees in the middle of the mob, desperately trying to gather my things, but someone intentionally kicked my notebook out of my reach. The flashing phone cameras were everywhere, completely blinding me. I couldn't breathe, and the crowd felt like a massive wall of hatred pressing down on me. I dropped my head, covered my ears with my hands, and just started sobbing uncontrollably right there on the pavement, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. Then a sudden, violent commotion broke out at the edge of the crowd. The jeering stopped instantly, replaced by a wave of sharp gasps. I pulled my hands away from my face and looked up through my tears to see that Min-jae had broken through the mob. But he didn't look like the calm, stoic Ice King everyone knew. He looked completely, utterly terrified. His composure was entirely gone. His eyes were wide with a frantic, breathless panic that sent a shockwave through the entire courtyard. A student stepped forward, still holding up a phone to film me, and Min-jae didn't even hesitate. He lunged forward, grabbed the phone out of the guy's hand, and hurled it violently against the brick wall, shattering it into pieces.
Get away from her.
Min-jae roared, his voice booming across the courtyard with a raw, protective fury that made the entire crowd instantly back away in horror. He aggressively shoved another guy who was standing too close, clearing a 5-foot radius around me in seconds. Nobody dared to move. Nobody dared to speak. The silence was absolute. Before I could even process what was happening, Min-jae dropped heavily to his knees right in the dirt next to me. He didn't care that his expensive clothes were getting ruined. His hands were visibly trembling as he reached out, caught me by the shoulders, and pulled me forcefully against his chest. He wrapped his arms around me tightly, burying his face into the side of my neck, holding me so close I could feel the rapid, chaotic thudding of his heart against my ribs. The entire university stood there, frozen, watching the most feared, untouchable heir in the country hold a crying scholarship girl in the middle of a dirty courtyard. Everyone at Hanseong University feared Kang Min-jae because they thought he could destroy them. But looking at him right then, feeling the desperate, terrified way he was clinging to me as if his entire world was ending, I realized the ultimate truth. Everyone feared him, but he feared losing me. He didn't wait for the administration or the campus security to arrive. Min-jae lifted me to my feet, picked up my scattered bag, and dragged me out of the courtyard, his iron grip on my hand never loosening for a single second. He walked right past the staring students, led me to his sleek sports car parked in the faculty lot, shoved me into the passenger seat, and slammed the door. He climbed into the driver's seat and guns the engine, peeling out of the university gates. For the next 30 minutes, he drove in total, suffocating silence. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't explain what happened. His knuckles were completely white against the leather steering wheel, his jaw set in a hard, angry line as he navigated the heavy Seoul traffic. We drove higher and higher up the mountain roads until we reached a private, gated access point overlooking the entire glittering skyline of Seoul. He parked the car, pushed open his door, and walked out onto a wide, secluded concrete rooftop that felt like it was suspended right above the clouds. We could see the entire city from up there, the endless grid of neon lights, the winding river, the tiny cars below. I pushed my door open and stepped out onto the roof, the cold wind instantly whipping my hair across my face. The adrenaline from the courtyard was still pumping through my veins, turning into a volatile mix of confusion and anger. I walked straight up to his back, loudly demanding to know why he was following me, deleting my files, and acting like a bodyguard when he wouldn't even speak to me. I poured out all my frustration, telling him to stop messing with my life. Min-jae didn't turn around immediately. He stood at the edge of the roof, looking out at the massive grid of city lights below. He looked incredibly small against the vast skyline. He looked lonely. Like, really, truly lonely. The kind of loneliness that money can't cure. Finally, he turned around to face me. The cold, unbothered expression he always wore at school was completely gone, replaced by a raw, heavy exhaustion.
Because my world is a snake pit, Unchai.
He said, his voice low and raspy against the wind.
Every single person who approaches me does it because they want a piece of my family's power, or because they're terrified of what my name can do to them. My grandfather, my father, Chai-won, they don't see a person. They see a corporate asset. You are the only real, uncorrupted thing I have seen in years. You look at me, and you don't care about the Kong name. But the closer I get to you, the more my family notices. I told you to delete the blog because I knew what Chai-won would do. I sat next to you in class. I followed you to the library. I stayed by your side because I wanted his investigators to see me. I wanted them to think I was the one targeting you, so they wouldn't look any deeper into your life. I am trying to keep them from destroying you, Unchai.
I stared at him, my anger dying in my throat as I heard the desperation in his voice. Min-jae stepped closer, his fingers gently brushing a stray strand of hair away from my face. His touch was incredibly warm, making my heart do a slow, violent flip in my chest. I wanted to lean into his hand, to reach out and hold him, but before I could make a move, Min-jae dropped his hand back into his pocket and took a step back, pulling his cold expression back over his face like armor. He was trying so hard to protect me from his world that he wouldn't even let himself get close to me. The conversation on the rooftop stayed with me for days, but it only made me more determined. I knew Min-jae was keeping a massive piece of the puzzle to himself. He was shielding me from something, and I needed to know exactly what his family was hiding before it completely ruined us both. Later that week, I used my student assistant card to access the university's restricted legacy archive room in the basement of the administration building. It's where they keep old files, donor records, and private historical documents that regular students aren't allowed to see. I sat at a dusty desk in the back, pulling up Min-jae's private student admissions file on the system, looking for any connection. But as I opened the heavy physical cabinet associated with his family's foundation, I noticed an old, faded yellow folder tucked deep behind the corporate folders. I pulled it out, blew the dust off the cover, and opened it. As I moved the pages aside, a small, heavy object fell out of the folder and landed right in my lap with a soft thud. I picked it up, and my breath completely hitched. It was a tiny, worn-out plastic keychain of a cartoon cat. The paint was chipped, and the metal ring was slightly rusted, but I recognized it instantly. It was mine. It was the exact keychain I had lost 12 years ago when I was a little girl. Suddenly, a massive rush of forgotten childhood memories flooded my mind, hitting me so hard I had to grip the edge of the desk to stay steady. 12 years ago, my father had a brief, low-level business meeting at the Grand Kong estate in the outskirts of Seoul. He had brought me along, leaving me to play in the courtyard while he went inside. While I was exploring the massive iron gates, a sudden, violent rainstorm broke out. I ran for cover near the guardhouse, and that's when I found a little boy. He was crouching in the corner of the stone wall, shivering violently, crying hysterically into his knees. His grandfather, Chairman Kang, had just locked him out of the main house in the freezing rain for hours as a discipline lesson because he had failed an elite tutor's exam. The little boy was terrified, soaking wet, and completely abandoned by everyone in that massive mansion. I had walked right up to him, popped open my bright yellow umbrella, and held it over his head. I sat down in the mud next to him, pulled my favorite cartoon cat keychain off my backpack, pressed it into a small, shivering hand, and told him not to cry because it was just rain, promising that when we grew up, I would become strong and protect him from the bad guys. I stared down at the chipped plastic keychain in my palm, tears springing to my eyes. That little boy was Kong Min-jae. He hadn't started sitting next to me in class out of a sudden, random college obsession. He had been looking for me for 12 years. He had kept my childhood keychain inside his most private folder all this time. He had recognized me the very first day of the semester on campus, even though my family had fallen into poverty and I had forgotten about that rainy afternoon completely. He remembered his promise. He had come back to protect me. But as I turned the next page of the yellow folder, the warmth of the childhood memory turned into pure, ice-cold horror. Underneath the keychain was a confidential corporate directive, stamped with the private seal of Hanseong Group and signed by Chairman Kang himself. I read the text, and my hands began to shake so violently the paper rattled. It wasn't a random corporate acquisition, and it wasn't a standard business takeover. 10 years ago, my father had been a mid-level accountant for one of Hanseong's subsidiaries. He had accidentally stumbled across a massive, multi-billion won corruption and tax evasion report within the company. Being an honest man, he had leaked it to the authorities. The scandal had completely humiliated Chairman Kong publicly, forced him to step down from a government advisory board, and cost his family billions in an international logistics deal. The chairman was a man obsessed with his pride, and he never forgot a slight. He had carried a vicious, quiet, pride-fueled blood grudge against my father for an entire decade. He had finally tracked my father's new, small tech parts company down 2 months ago. The document in my hands detailed a cold, calculated, ruthless strategy to completely bankrupt my parents, foreclose on our family home, and ensure my father was blacklisted from every industry in the country as a late, devastating revenge. The puzzle pieces clicked together in my head, and the revelation made my stomach churn. Min-jae hadn't been following me because he wanted a college romance. He had discovered his grandfather's secret vindictive plot weeks ago. He knew that the second Chairman Kang realized my father's daughter was studying at Hanseong University, the final strike would hit my family immediately. So Min-jae had intentionally embedded himself in my life, creating the public illusion that he was targeting me, acting as a terrifying shield so his grandfather's dangerous investigators wouldn't look any closer at my parents. He was sacrificing his own standing to keep my family alive. The next morning, everything exploded. Chai-won and the grandfather intercepted me right outside the library, backed by their corporate security team. With a smug look on her face, Chai-won slid an official, expedited foreclosure notice for my family's home into my hands, telling me it was effective by 4 p.m. and mockingly advising me to pack my bags and leave Seoul forever. But she forgot who she was dealing with. I didn't cry. Instead, I firmly gripped the flash drive containing all the secret data Min-jae had been silently compiling on his grandfather's illegal business dealings. I immediately went to look for Min-jae, found him in the student lounge, grabbed him by the hand, and marched us right past corporate security straight into the Hanseong Group's main executive boardroom, completely interrupting an ongoing emergency shareholder meeting. The entire board of directors froze in absolute shock as a scholarship student and the family's heir walked in hand. I didn't hesitate. I marched straight to the head of the table where Chairman Kong sat, slammed my laptop down, and projected the illegal market data onto the massive projector screen for everyone to see. "Cancel the foreclosure on my father's house, Chairman Kang," I said, my voice ringing across the silent room with an absolute, unshakable authority. "Tear up the takeover documents right now. If you don't sign a legal release form within 2 minutes, this entire database goes live to the national press and every whistleblower outlet in the country. Your pride won't survive the scandal, and neither will your stock price." The grandfather was shaking with pure, unbridled rage, his cane trembling against the floor as he looked from the screen to his grandson. Min-jae didn't back down. He stepped forward, aligning his shoulder with mine, squeezed my hand tightly, and looked at his grandfather with absolute coldness.
Do exactly what she says, grandfather,
Min-jae said, his voice deep, calm, and completely immovable.
Sign the release forms now, or watch the entire empire you value more than life collapse before the market closes today. The choice is yours.
The boardroom remained dead silent for what felt like an eternity. The directors were looking at the screen, then at Chairman Kong, their faces pale as they realized the data was completely bulletproof. The grandfather's knuckles turned white around the handle of his silver cane. Faced with total, public exposure and the immediate ruin of his company's reputation, his pride finally crumbled. With a hand that was visibly shaking with anger, Chairman Kong pulled a fountain pen from his pocket, dragged the legal release documents toward him, and signed his name aggressively across the bottom of the pages, pressing down so hard the paper nearly tore. He threw the pen onto the table and glared up at Min-jae with pure, venomous hatred.
You have chosen a nobody over your own blood. You have used my own company to threaten me. Effective immediately. You are stripped of your succession rights. Your inheritance is entirely revoked. Your titles are gone. Your accounts are frozen. And you are completely kicked out of this family with absolutely nothing to your name. From this moment on, you are no longer a gang.
I held my breath, my heart aching as I looked at Min-jae. The weight of what he had just lost was immense. He had just given up a multi-billion-won future, his status, his security, everything he had ever known, just to save my family from his grandfather's grudge. He had absolutely nothing left. But as Min-jae looked at the old man, the frozen, unbothered mask he had worn for years broke into a genuine, beautiful, radiant smile. It was the first time I had ever seen him look completely happy. He didn't bow and he didn't apologize. He just turned to me, locked his fingers securely through mine, and looked back at his grandfather.
Thank you, grandfather,
Min-jae said softly, his voice full of a relief that made my throat tighten.
For the first time in my entire life, I am finally free.
We walked out of the massive glass corporate headquarters together, leaving the shouting directors behind us. We stepped onto the wide concrete plaza outside. The evening sun was just beginning to set, painting the wide sky above the Seoul skyscrapers in deep, beautiful shades of gold, pink, and soft violet. The air felt clear, the wind carrying away the remnants of the storm. Min-jae stopped walking right in the middle of the plaza. He turned to face me, his hands reaching out to catch mine. Without his family's shadow hanging over him, his eyes looked completely vulnerable. The ice was gone, replaced by a deep, emotional warmth that made my soul ache. I looked down at our joined hands, tears of gratitude and overwhelming emotion welling up in my eyes, and softly asked him if he regretted making this choice now that he had been stripped of everything. Min-jae let out a soft, low laugh that vibrated through the air between us. He took a slow step forward, closing the distance completely, and raised his warm hands to gently cup both sides of my face, his thumbs wiping the tears from my cheeks. He looked down at me with an absolute, unshakable devotion that stole the breath right out of my lungs.
Regret it?
He murmured, his voice incredibly gentle.
Unchai, the empire was just a golden cage. My family was a prison. You are the only real thing I have ever known. You're the first thing I ever chose for myself.
And right there, under the sweeping gold of the sunset, in the middle of the crowded city plaza, he finally leaned down and pulled me into our very first, long-awaited kiss. It was sweet, desperate, and filled with a 12-year promise that had finally been kept. It was worth every single second of the pain, and as I wrapped my arms around his neck, I knew I was never letting him go. A few weeks later, the weather had completely cleared, and I was back at Hanseong University. It was a beautiful, crisp afternoon, and I was walking down the main library steps after a lecture. A group of wealthy, arrogant students, the ones who used to follow Chaiwan around, tried to corner me on the concrete landing. They were sneering and snickering, talking trash about how my billionaire protector had been completely cut off by his family and was now a nobody. But before the leader of the group could even finish his sentence, the sound of tires screeching echoed from the bottom of the steps. A sleek, completely ordinary sedan came to a halt at the curb. The door pushed open, and a man stepped out. He wasn't wearing a multi-million-won designer suit anymore, just a simple black coat, a white t-shirt, and regular jeans. But the second his boots hit the pavement, the entire courtyard went dead silent. He still carried that exact same untouchable, terrifying authority. He walked up the library steps. He didn't say a single word. He didn't pull out a phone, and he didn't make a threat. He just stopped on the landing and leveled a single ice-cold, unblinking glare at the group of bullies. Within 2 seconds, the color completely drained from their faces. Their smirks vanished, they nervously grabbed their designer bags, and they literally turned around and ran down the stairs, scrambling to get away from him as fast as their legs could carry them. Min-jae watched them go, then turned his attention back to me. The second our eyes met, his freezing expression completely melted away into that soft, breathtakingly vulnerable smile that only I ever got to see. He took a fast step forward to pull me into a grand, dramatic embrace. But as he reached out his arms, his boot caught the edge of his own shoelace. He fumbled forward with a sudden, chaotic gasp, completely losing his balance, and nearly tumbled directly into me, knocking us both toward the stone railing. I caught him by the waist, and we both just burst out laughing, the sound of our laughter echoing across the quiet courtyard. He wrapped his arms around me tightly, pulling me against his chest, his smile making the whole campus feel warm. Everyone at Hanseong University still feared Kang Min-jae. The rumors about him were still endless, and the students still lowered their eyes whenever he walked down the hall. The difference was, I knew the absolute truth. He was only soft with me.